So I don't know about all countries. I know about mine and a few others. So I don't know, I mean, where you come from, but does anyone know how it is in his or her country? I can tell you what it is in mine. So suppose that we have an election, okay, for a president or a member of parliament, okay, and of course, I mean, I'm talking about countries where you have single winner elections, like for instance in my country we have single winner elections for both the president. So everybody elects the president, and also for members of parliament, which are elected district by district. So in a district we have to elect one person. So what happens in case of a perfect tie? In your country, yeah? If you know. You repeat the election. Okay, yeah. What is your country? Okay. You repeat the election. Yeah, and of course, I mean, it's likely that the second time there will not be a tie. Yeah. The Constitution says that in case of a tie, we do the election, which is another way of proceeding, which does not actually break ties, which is another way of solving the problem. Any other example? Actually, in my country, which is France, there is a priority between candidates, and the priority corresponds to age. So the oldest wins in case of a tie. This is experience. Yeah, this never happens. Actually. Well, actually, yes, it happens. Yeah, actually, this does happen in municipal elections. Election for the mayor or the town council. So yeah, then sometimes there are ties, and then sometimes they use that. But for members of parliament and of course for president, I mean, this never happened. But it must be specified. Okay, so this is why it is important to have these voting correspondences. And remark that, I mean, it's because of these ties, it's generally not possible to ensure both neutrality and anonymity. You cannot have a voting rule. In most cases, you cannot define a voting rule that is both anonymous and neutral. For some specific cases of the number of voters and candidates, it is possible. These are exceptions. Can you tell me an example of a number of voters and candidates for which it is possible to have a voting rule that is neutral and anonymous? Take majority, for instance. When can you use majority and ensure that there is always a single winner without tie?
When there's one participant.
Oh yes, okay. If there is one participant, that's true. But also less trivial cases, yes.
An odd number of voters.
If there is an odd number of voters, of course. Yeah. Except if you allow abstentions. But if you disallow abstentions, then for two candidates and an odd number of voters, then majority never produces a tie. And more generally, there are other pairs of MN that guarantee that there is no tie. But for most pairs MN, there may be ties. Okay, so we have this choice. When we talk about voting, we have always this choice: are we talking about voting rule or voting correspondences? Voting rule that output a single winner, or voting correspondences that output a non-empty set of, we call them co-winners or sometimes friend winners. So there are two, these are the two views. Something that is very important is when I say a set of co-winners. this does not mean that all the members of this set are elected. If we have an election for a member of parliament in a district and we have a perfect tie, so the voting correspondence will return the set of the two candidates, but there will be only one seat. Then there will be some tie-breaking mechanism that selects a winner. So this is why we call them pre-winners. I mean, this is, you apply the voting correspondence, you find a set, sometimes there is a tie, so you find a set of pre-winners, and one of them will be the final winner after some tie-breaking mechanism. Okay? So they won't all be elected. I mean, there will only be one which is elected. Later in the tutorial we'll talk about multi-winner elections, but that is different. Multi-winner elections is for elections where really we have several winners, like if you want to elect a committee. A committee, usually you have a number of positions, like you want to elect 10 people, and then there will be 10 people elected. But again, I mean, ties may happen. Maybe for the first 9 that's obvious, and maybe for the position number 10 there will be a tie. So again, there can be ties. Okay, so the usual way of defining a voting rule, and not a voting rule, is that first we define the voting correspondence, because it is much easier to define the voting correspondence. And then we assume that the voting rule is implicitly defined from the voting correspondence, F, and a tie-breaking priority. Mathematically, it means that it's the composition of a voting correspondence and a tie-breaking priority, a tie-breaking mechanism. And so the most common assumption for tie-breaking is we use a priority relation between candidates, which means that we break neutrality. So for instance, we say that the oldest, in case of the tie, the oldest wins. But in some other cases, we may break anonymity and say that the head of the committee makes the decision. And so once we have a voting correspondence and a tie-breaking priority, then we have a voting rule. So in the rest of the tutorial, actually I will simply define voting correspondences. Sometimes when we need to specify the tie-breaking priority, we will specify it. But it will be much easier to define voting correspondences, but keeping in mind that the voting rule will always use a tie-breaking mechanism just in case we have a tie. So an example, suppose again that we have 2 candidates, A and B, and so we define the majority correspondence that I call MASH, okay, which outputs A if there is a strict majority for A, B if there is a strict majority for B, and the pair AB if there is a perfect tie. Okay. So if we have only 2 votes and a perfect tie, then MASH P returns AB. And then majority with the tie-breaking priority A more priority than B, and majority with the tie-breaking priority B as priority over A are voting rules. Okay. And if we take majority with the priority for A over B, apply to P, then we get A. So first we apply the correspondence, we have AB, and then we apply the tie-breaking priority and we get A. Okay? So in the rest of the talk, once again, we define usually correspondences, and rules are implicitly defined from the correspondence by using a tie-breaking mechanism. Is that okay? Okay. Don't hesitate to ask questions. Okay, so last comment about majority. So when we have only 2 candidates, things are very easy. I mean, there's not much to be said. It looks obvious that the only reasonable correspondence is majority that returns A or B if there is a strict majority, and in case of a tie, we output the pair AB. Okay. This looks the only reasonable rule. And so I'm giving the first example of the characterization theorem. Characterization theorem, remember, is the theorem that says if we want a rule that satisfies this and that property, then the rule has to be of that form. And in case of majority, it's an exact characterization theorem, which is that if we have this and that property, the rule should be that one, which is majority. And this is what we call an axiomatization of the rule. So the axiomatization of majority, which comes back to May. May is not a mod. This is a person. This is a person. 1952. So anonymity, okay, all voters count the same. Neutrality, all candidates count the same. And positive responsiveness, which says that if we have a winner, or a gray winner, and so suppose that this winner is A, and then if we change the profile such that one of the voters who ranked before, he ranked A below B, and now he ranks A above B. So A moves upwards in the preference relation of a voter. If he was a winner before, if he was a winner before, it has to remain a winner. Plus, if it was a tied winner, it has to become a single winner. Okay? That looks obvious. And it's actually quite easy to show that a voting correspondence satisfies these three properties if and only if it is majority correspondence. So far, I made some rather strong assumptions. I used to give the tutor without this slide and to ask people to complain about the assumptions, and usually the complaints were that kind. So maybe I shouldn't show you that slide and let you complain, but because you had a dinner until very late in the night, I think it's maybe more efficient if I show the possible complaints, and of course I will try to answer them. So the first complaint is, why do you always assume that you have to specify a linear ranking? That you have you cannot say this candidate and that candidate, they are the same. I can't decide between them. The answer is, we can. We can do that if we want. It's just that it's simpler if we don't. Because we have only 3 hours for the tutorial and not 4 or 5. And so I prefer to give you to define voting rules in the simplest case, where every voter gives a linear ranking over the candidates. A prefer to B, prefer to C, prefer to D, and not A prefer to B and C, prefer to D and E. But it can be done. It's not difficult to extend voting rules when we have ties between candidates. Second question is, why don't we allow voters to express incomparabilities? Incomparability is not the same as indifference. Okay, in formal terms, mathematics, incomparability is, in the partial order we have incomparability if we have, suppose that we have the okay, suppose that we have this relation. Okay, so this is what you call partial weak order. Partial because we have incomparabilities, okay, and weak because we have differences. So you see that here we have an indifference. Okay, so C is at least as good as D, and D is at least as good as C. So this is an indifference. But if we take B and C, for instance, you see that we don't have any comparison in either direction. We don't have that. Sorry, that was B and C. So this is incomparability. Can you find examples? Can you tell me about practical examples where we may have indifference and practical examples where we may have incomparability? Can you tell me an informal explanation of the difference between both, using example? Can you find me an example where you would like to say this and this alternative and that alternative, I'm indifferent between them, and then another example where you say I cannot compare them? Yes?
For example, whether there are candidates from parties of similar beliefs.
Yes?
I know I prefer B and C to A, who is, for example, left or right wing, but I can't distinguish between.
Okay, this is a good example of indifference. What about incomparability?
I think the same can apply.
If you have two candidates of the same party, they are exactly the same belief, they will implement the same program, you are really indifferent. You cannot say you cannot compare. You can compare, you can say they are the same. Incomparability is really the impossibility of ranking them. But why?
Maybe limited information.
So there are two main sources of incomparability. The first one, maybe the most common, is lack of information, like incomplete knowledge. If I give you the choice between two, suppose I give you the choice between two locations for spending your holiday, but I'm going to give you some weird French locations that you don't know, some French villages that you don't know, you've never heard about these locations, so I give you, let me give you two names of towns that you've never heard about. I give you Neuchâtel and La Châtre. You've never heard about these names, but you have to decide in which you spend your holiday. Are you really indifferent between these? Not exactly. If you knew, you would be able to say which one you prefer. Or imagine also that, another example with a dish, you see two dishes coming, you can see the dish, but you don't know whether it's meat or fish, or you don't know what's inside, but you have to choose. And you cannot ask a question. So you will react by, actually, the reaction is not the same as indifferent. When you are indifferent, you don't want to ask questions, you say, give me. But when you have incomparability, you get attention because you need to get more information, and you will react by saying, I'm sorry, I cannot compare. I cannot say. So that's the first kind of incomparability. Then the second type of incomparability is intrinsic incomparability. This is more philosophical incomparability, where you cannot compare things, for instance, because they are of very different nature. If I ask you to compare a dish and a course, you say it is meaningless to compare a dish and a course. I can compare two courses or two dishes. When we talk about incomparability, we mostly refer to the first time. We call epistemic incomparability due to the lack of knowledge, incomplete knowledge. That was the slide. And third question is people will want always to give numbers, and there are actually even groups of people who are very much in favor of using voting rules that use numbers. it's not always a bad idea, actually. Sometimes it's good to allow people to express numbers. So we call triple visor, for instance. But sometimes it's a very bad idea to use numbers. So there are many reasons for which it is a bad idea. Maybe the first reason is that in many contexts, people, voters are unable to give numbers. I mean, they don't like that, and they find it much easier to rank candidates than to give numbers to them. We call that eliciting. I mean, eliciting is the process of asking voters about their preferences, and eliciting numerical preferences is something sometimes difficult. It is not too difficult when money is involved. If you ask someone how much, what is the maximum price you would like to give for this product, then it's quite easy. But often, most of the time in voting, money is not involved. I mean, you cannot compensate anything with money transfers. Okay? Okay, so that was, so we talked about voting with two candidates, and we saw that it was extremely easy with two candidates. Now, what happens if we have three candidates or more? And so the rest of the talk is going to focus on 3 candidates or more, because this is where things become difficult. So I have an example that I took to a friend. So this is an example where we're going to vote with actually 5 candidates, and we have, I think, 100 votes. And another question is who should be elected? Okay, so have a look at these votes. Take a few seconds and so you say C. Okay. Why not? There will be actually I will give you arguments for each of them. But okay. Take 1 minute and suppose that you're the head. Actually, suppose that you are okay. You ask 100 voters to rank. Maybe these would be papers. Okay, you want to give an award to the best paper, and you have 5 candidates. 5 candidates for the best paper, and you are the head of the committee. You got these votes, and you have to decide. Okay, so tell me what you do. Take 1 minute, think about what you do, and tell me what you do. Did everyone decide, or do you need more time? Who hasn't decided yet? Okay, so who would elect A? Yes. B? B? Yes. C? Okay. D? D? No one? E? Okay, looks like it's A, B, and C. So those who want to elect A, those who there, I mean, why? Can you give me an explanation?
Because he has the majority.
Because he's ranked first by 33 people, and no one else is ranked by more